Good evening, everyone. Do you want to sit down for a second and I'll introduce you?
Sure. I wasn't going to stand at the podium.
Welcome to the 5th TransformGov Talks event, a beautiful evening to be stuck in the basement of a government building. I'm Gavin Freegard, one of the organisers of TransformGov Talks, and it's lovely to see so many of you tonight. And welcome to everyone joining us online as well. A quick introduction for those of you who are new to TransformGov Talks. There are lots of people in and around government who care about making it better. A lot of you are in this room right now. And this meetup is for you. So this is a new monthly meetup sharing innovation in the public sector, examples of interesting ways of delivering things, new perspectives on public services and how the public sector could work better. Tonight's event is being live streamed, as those of you joining us online will obviously know, and it is on the record as well. You'll be able to watch video and hear audio after the event as well. The aim is to sustain the energy of things like UK GovCamp, for any of you who've been to that, to try to sustain that energy through the year, bringing public sector reformers together. But we don't just want this to be about data, digital and tech, and actually some of the presentations tonight will range a lot more widely than that. And very importantly, thing to know about TransformGov Talks, there will be free pizza. He says, optimistically, hoping that it's going to be delivered. I'm sure it will be. We're always looking for other people to help us out. So if you would be interested in helping us organise this, if you would like to speak or know someone that should, or if you'd like to sponsor us and make sure that we are in free pizza until the end of the year, you can get in touch with us at transformgovtalks@gmail.com. Now, this is our 5th event. You can see all of our wonderful speakers from previous events before. We've had Andreas talking to us about I.AI, Jenny talking to us about the advisory panel on the Digital Centre of Government. Then we had Cy and Holly talking about bringing digital and policy teams together. Isadora and Mia talking about missions. Then we had Miriam up at the top talking about participation in government. We had Sarah talking about the new GDS. Henry giving us a very entertaining history of the National Audit Office, such a thing does exist. And we had Kirsty talking about digital ID. Hopefully that gives you a sense of the range of topics that we've covered so far and look forward to covering through the rest of the series. Now, how tonight is going to work, you're going to hear from 2 brilliant speakers. They're going to have 25 to 30 minutes each. They'll present or talk for a bit, and then we'll go into questions. Those of you in the room can put your hands up. Those of you online can use the chat on Google Meet. And if you're in the room or online, you can go to slido.com and use code 206208 to submit your questions. We'll be finishing at 7. We will be heading to the pub afterwards. That's the Buckingham Arms. If you're online, you're very welcome to try to get to the Buckingham Arms for 7. And we will be having free pizza at the back as well. So who are our brilliant speakers tonight? Well, first, we're going to be hearing from Catherine Day from the Cabinet Office, who, amongst other things, runs the Cross-Government Participatory Methods Forum, and she's going to be talking about participatory government. So those of you who were here for Miriam's presentation a few months back, very relevant, thinking about public participation in how government works. We'll then be hearing from another Cabinet Office speaker, and that will be Kane, on Test, Learn and Grow, quite an important initiative of the new government on how to get things done. A reminder, please do submit your questions. We even have a QR code. I can feel the excitement in the room from that. Or you can go to slido.com and use the code 206208. Before I hand over to Catherine, just to tell you that event number 6 is in the diary, and we'll be back here at the MOJ on Wednesday, the 28th of May, 2025. Please do put that in your diaries now. In fact, we even have a slide to force you to put it in your diaries now. You can scan the event on the left, you can get calendar hold on the right, or you can go to transformgov.org.uk and sign up there. That's more than enough from me. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you. This is appreciation for the QR codes and all of the rest of it. Is it really annoying if I move around? Okay. So I'm not going to talk at you with slides because I would like this to be much more of an active exchange. So I want to insert a couple of questions for us and then give you a little bit of stuff to help you react to them. I love this sort of TransformGov whole initiative, partly because I've been a civil servant for 25 years, and this really means that I want to transform government. I've worked in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I grew up in Northern Ireland, so I've sort of seen what happens when things break down, and I feel very personally that we sort of sometimes take our systems, our institutions very much for granted. It's really easy to do that, and it can change very quickly if we let ourselves do that. So from a personal perspective, participatory government is something that I just feel is important. It's something we all need to be interested in. And I should give you a little bit of background on me, but the three things that I really want to put in our minds to kick off with are what participatory government is. It's great that you've already heard from Miriam, so actually I probably don't need to answer that very much. She's brilliant at it. Why it's important, and what we're doing about it. And then really I want to talk about how we can all help to achieve it. A little bit more about me, other than this sort of being a recovering 25-year bureaucrat. Some of the things that I've done in that time have involved pretty sort of analytical things. I was involved in the 2021 review of our foreign and security and development policy that has given us our current national security and international strategy. As part of that, I looked at our systems and asked the question, how do we need to change our systems to make sure that we deliver these really ambitious things that governments, and especially the political parts of them, have a real habit of saying that they want to deliver, but they're not necessarily being beautifully equipped to do so. And the integrated review is quite an interesting case in point. It sets these really big, lasting strategic objectives. Let's have an open international order, which are good objectives. And then every prime minister, ever since the one that commissioned that, has wanted to do their own integrated review. So there's something about the system that's not sort of allowing these things to endure. And what our analysis gave us were sort of four really important ways in which we need to transform government if we're going as a society to deliver these things that we all want and need. So health, well-being, prosperity, security, whatever. The top one was that we need way better collective strategy capability as a country, as a society. Now, in the integrated review, you'll find a couple of pages at the very back which talks about this stuff, and it's couched quite carefully in government wording. So let me tell you what's underneath this. This talk about collective strategy capability was all about addressing the fact that as a country right now, we really struggle to be on the front foot, to be anticipatory, to think about the future together, to be participatory, so to actually tap into all of the strengths that we've got, not just in our sort of government system, but in the whole of society. We're really not mobilizing and galvanizing those right now. And then there was a third bit of systems reform that came out really strongly around being evidence-led, and that this wasn't really a sort of, it's something that everybody recognizes as important. And then it's something really that doesn't translate into how decisions actually get made right now, or into the national conversation and people's thinking in our culture right now. So the balance of tips more towards ideology and that sort of thing. I'm also an anthropologist, and so the lens that I bring to this is also quite an evolutionary one. I'm interested in what it is that helps groups to survive and thrive. And again, this plays into seeing ourselves as groups. Over the course of my civil service career, I've been quite surprised by how useful anthropology is. I didn't expect that. Everything from understanding the impact of Alistair Campbell on this sort of vibrant personality on a government system that wasn't really very ready to challenge radical ideas. It saw it as being its job to just sort of implement whatever sort of came from on high as it saw it. But right through to thinking about what we actually mean by government. And what I find about our country right now is that we have quite an other view of government. So people outside government who I talk to very often are, well, these are things that government should do. Government should be coming up with all of the initiatives that are going to keep us all healthy and look after us when we get into trouble. Government should be ensuring our security. There's less of a sense of the collective responsibility about things. Coming from the anthropological world, this is not at all how I see government. I see government as being the best way that we've invented as a group, as a society right now, for doing the things that we want to do collectively. So these are our institutions, and the reason that they are as they are is they're the sum total of what we've let them to be, let them become, let them be, of the choices that we've made about whether to get involved or not. So the way I see it, government isn't just our political system and the ability, which we're so lucky to have, to choose the people who represent our interests every few years. It's not just the administrative system, so the civil service, which sees its role right now, it's sort of set out in the Civil Service Code, as being to implement the things that our elected representatives are there to sort of get us to do. I see government as being something that all of us need to do together, and I see a big institutional gap right now in the mechanisms that enable us to do that. So in this country right now, government consultation is a big thing. A lot of it happens. We have a government and a civil service that is very keen to understand what people are thinking and feeling, that exists to meet people's needs. There is nobody working in government who doesn't see it as being their personal mission to sort of contribute to making that happen. It's not really working all that well, though. And so we're seeing all sorts of reasonably disastrous trends, sort of collapse in trust, decisions coming out of government that sometimes conflict, that are difficult to understand. Why are we sort of prioritizing growth in these ways above prioritizing adaptation and mitigation of climate change? These are sort of difficult issues, and they're issues really that need to bring in our sort of shared values as a country. So this is all building towards a case for participation and for developing new ways of involving people in the way that we choose to organize ourselves. Now, happily, this country isn't the only sort of country in our petri dish of experimentation, and happily central government isn't the only bit of our country that we're sort of thinking about here. So when we began to examine the need for participatory government, what we do about it, we looked at Scotland, and I'm really hoping that Doreen is online in some shape or form. We looked at what local government has done, and we have just brilliant examples in this country of really well-developed methods. We have brilliant expertise in the UK in organisations like, Kerry's, the National Centre for Social Research, the charity involved. Really, really good at running structured, deliberative debates and engagements that actually change decision-making processes. And these words I'm using are quite important in relation to how we have come to frame participatory government and define participatory government. So participatory government isn't that thing at the one far end of the spectrum, which is just government talking to people and asking people to feed in and not interacting. Participatory government is way at the other end, and it's about a live conversation that actually influences what happens and how decisions happen. And so Scotland, for example, local authorities by law there have to allocate a certain percentage of their budget through participatory budgeting, and that's been transformative. Camden has all sorts of incredible initiatives that are citizen-informed and citizen-led. The sort of participatory government that we're encouraging central governments to consider isn't just the public, it's also involving experts and government partners who need to actually act on the findings of these things. So I've rampaged a little bit through why participatory government is important, what it is and how we're framing it. So I very quickly want to move on to the, so what do we do about it? What can we all do about it? There are a couple of things that we've got going in central government to help with this. So I run something called the Participatory Methods Forum, which is a network to encourage and enable all of our civil service colleagues to adopt these methods, to understand them, to know what works, to share their experiences. And the more disasters, the better we learn from them. So well, I mean, I don't mean that. Obviously, I don't want anything to be disastrous at all. And my absolute priority for this year is to have a brilliant national scale intervention on something really, really important that's delivered wildly successfully. There's no reason that we can't do this. We need to sort of show the way. So this is one of the things that I'm keen to do. Let's create an exemplar. Let's use these incredibly powerful tools that we've got. Not just these sort of deliberative interventions like citizens' assemblies that Ireland have shown could be hugely effective to help a whole country tackle difficult things like, well, what to do about abortion in a highly Catholic country, very, very inflammatory. But also using tools like, and we have Pratik here in the room, like the participatory tech, get people engaging online. But 20 years ago, a friend of mine was, 20 years ago, I might be doing him discredit, but was running the intellectual property office here, and they had to update their patent regulations, and so they put the existing regulations on a wiki platform and just let the patent community loose on them and said, hey, you know, what would you like them to say? And brilliant product, delivered in a completely resource-free way that everybody was very happy with. That sort of thing we can do quite easily. So we have this Participatory Methods Forum across government. You've heard from Miriam, so you know that something called the Collaborative Democracy Network exists, and I'd encourage absolutely everybody to sign up to that. It's a completely brilliant way, I think, of wiring our network for this together in this country. We also have a Participatory Methods Steering Group, which is all about bringing in experts together with the right people in government to make the changes happen in government. And then I'd just like to do more sort of with you and hear from you about sort of where you think it's going well, where we can do more. We have a bit of an agenda in the steering group. So our mission basically is to help governments to unlock the power of these approaches, and in order that we improve delivery and outcomes and restore trust. For this year, we've got 6 buckets of areas where we think actually these are the biggest issues that we should be pointing this sort of stuff at. But we've also got a bit of an institutional change agenda. So how do we need to tweak the system? How do we sort of, and the whole system, and not just in government, but including Parliament and including other institutions. How can we shape that connective tissue that brings in really important partners, like the BBC, like others? I'm going to throw it open there, just stop talking and hope there are some questions.
Well, Catherine, thank you very much. I'll come to questions in the room in a second. Do put your hand up. Wait for me to come at you with the microphone, where I get to feel like a giant, holding a tiny microphone over. We are on the record, but do tell us who you are and where you're from if you can. And a reminder, you can go to slido.com and the code is 206208. Who'd like to ask the first question? Put one right down here.
Question is probably the wrong word, actually, because you asked me sort of.
Hi, Catherine. I'm Moira. I lead the behavioural science team in the Cabinet Office for the Government Communications Service. And my question is, so I think, doing more participatory methods makes so much sense for all the reasons you've given. One of the things I've observed is that there's a lot of people saying, I have the solution to low trust in government, and my solution is this, or my solution is that. And probably in reality, there's no single silver bullet. How do you think you overcome that challenge, in the sense that often what people want to hear in government is one solution that they can go with, because it's quite complicated to be hearing from lots of different people? Have you found this to be a challenge? How do you overcome it? Do you need to bring everyone together? Or do you just sort of keep, fighting for your, solution, and then hope that that gets heard? So yeah, that's my kind of question and reflection, I suppose. And I'm happy to give some examples of those other initiatives if that's helpful.
It's really interesting, this whole question of trust, which is totally driving, or one element that's completely driving this whole agenda, alongside actually is just how we do government better and make sure it genuinely meets people's needs. And I think so much of this is about a mindset shift, isn't it? And it's about exposing why trust matters, where trust is right now, and helping us collectively to understand the things that we each need to do, which will look different in different places, to restore that. I find it so interesting how different parts of our system, not just in the civil service, in other parts of government as well, think about trust, or don't think about trust actually at all. It's one of the 3 values of the Cabinet Office, which I think is quite useful actually. And so to an extent, it's a live conversation in our department, and it's something that's on our minds more or less every day, depending on whether we're in part of the building that has that sort of poster on it or what have you. So there's something about making sure that we sort of keep it in mind and have it there as a very explicit, not just as a value actually, but as a very explicit aim for what it is that we're about doing. But I think more broadly, and Gavin, you asked me before I came about reading and stuff I would recommend. I recommend that everybody read Richard Edelman's remarks at Davos this year, off the back of his 2025 Trust Barometer. They are so incisive and really get to grips with the rising sense of grievance that from the Edelman research is driving the crisis of trust in institutions worldwide. Now, different countries look a bit different, but for us in the UK, that really resonates. And I think until we really understand those broader drivers, then it's really difficult to understand in each of our different parts of the system the parts that we need to play in restoring it. I think it's not just about government earning trust by doing the job better and meeting the needs better. It's also that bigger cultural shift, changing the national dialogue, showing people, creating ways for people to shape decisions so that we all know that they can be trusted because we have been involved in shaping them, and that doesn't exist at the moment. I'm interested in what thoughts that provokes. Some people have talked about changing the law around government consultation. I wonder whether that would help actually, so that it has to be deliberative rather than.
I'll go online in a second, but
thanks so much, Greg Rosen, St Newgate. As you say, trust is so hugely important, and if there is to be trust in consultations, trust in democracy, trust in policy making, I was struck when I was in government, and I continue to be struck now I'm not in government, that there were colleagues who preferred policy-based evidence to evidence-based policy, sometimes because possibly they were scared of genuinely consulting in case the answer came back different than what they wanted or expected. Potentially, they feared that an answer would come back pointing out that there was a better option than they'd thought of. And this might perhaps suggest that they weren't good enough because they hadn't already known the best advice to give. Or perhaps an answer might come back, or options might come back that were unpalatable either to parts of government, to their own department, to NGOs or interest groups, or their ministers. But if government talks about consultation and engages in consultation, and government has for years spent a lot of money on consultations, but those who are consulted lose confidence that consultations are genuine. And there is a sense in business, and there's a sense amongst voters that not all consultations are genuine, and that some consultations are intensely preconceived and euphemistic. How can that not undermine trust? At the same time, you've got people who want to build trust and want to do it genuinely. But whilst you still have this other approach,
I think you should come up and take over, Greg.
It will undermine. How do you persuade those who are scared to genuinely consult, to be more confident about it?
I think the fear thing is really, really important, because I see that everywhere in the system. I also think that the rising rates of mental illness, an interesting manifestation in some cases, is something quite similar, actually, and that is the disempowerment. So I don't think that we've got consultation right by any means. It's really difficult to make consultation right when it's, you know, putting something out there, asking for inputs, which may well go into a black hole, and then reacting to that. You need something much more deliberative, where, particularly on really complex issues, I mean, the land use framework, oh my goodness, what a fantastic example of a really ambitious bit of systems thinking. And also, though, if it's going to work, goodness, it needs all of us to engage with it and help to shape it and help to sort of understand how it applies where we are. And you've actually also touched on another bit of reading, the Carnegie UK work, looking at the impact of these participatory approaches. You've touched on you know, the one big risk that they pulled out, which was, so on the whole, genuinely participatory approaches that aren't that sort of blank consultation, but are deliberative processes that are designed to feed into genuine decision making, where there is genuine openness about the results and about responding. Those sorts of well-designed, well-done participatory interventions are massively effective. They transform outcomes. They're hugely, wildly trusted, and it really helps. But done badly, you're completely right that they have the absolute opposite effect, and nothing could undermine trust more, and trust goes backwards. So my answer to your lovely, expansive question is we have to do them well, and we have to. There's something that we really need to think about as a society around fear, and around how we've structured our institutions around the stick rather than around the carrot, and about, you know, it's hardly surprising that, you know, being on the record sends shivers through the spines of most bureaucrats, and you know, it's terrifying being a politician right now with the media discourse as it is, and it's difficult to have these conversations about complex issues without accidentally saying something that you know might need to be challenged and expanded on, and it's just hard. So there's something about, I don't know, creating a kinder national culture, coming together around where we want to be, and just understanding how we can each contribute. That we have to address that fear. Yeah.
I'm going to squeeze in a couple of questions from online. So first of all, Amy Everett. Evening, Amy. Asks, does the Participatory Methods Forum publish their working strategy? It would be great to weave their work into my team's research strategy at the NHS. And the second question from Anonymous, good evening to you, Anonymous, is which parts of participatory government, other than elections, cannot be ignored or overruled by elected officials?
I wouldn't mind Anonymous expanding on that a little bit, because I don't, I don't think that at the moment we can overrule anything really, either in terms of the codes of conduct, like the civil service code that we operate under, or in terms of cultural norms. It's just not how our institutions right now work. But I get talking on Friday. Amy, join the forum. We have lots of your colleagues. We would love to have you. We've created various toolkits and things that I think can help, and we would also love to learn from your own experience of implementing these things. Department for Health and Social Care has been pretty active in terms of trying to do participation better. I think there's lots to learn from the sorts of slightly more developed consultation that's been done around things like the NHS 10-year plan. Drop me a line.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure we could keep going all evening with reflections and discussions on what Catherine's been talking about. We will try and get a bit more from Anonymous. But in the meantime, Catherine, thank you very much. Now, I will invite Cara to come up to the stage just as I get the slides back up, which will hopefully all work perfectly. Do you want to say?
Cool, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I think, yeah, what I'm talking about will lend itself quite nicely to what Catherine started us off with. And I'll be talking about the Test, Learn, and Grow program, which is a brand new program in the Cabinet Office, part of public sector reform. So one way that we're trying to change the system. A little bit about myself. I've been working in government for 8 years. All of my previous experience up until now has been in the digital kind of bubble of government. So started off my civil service career in the government digital service, working on communities for user-centered design across government. Then got moved into the Central Digital and Data Office, did some work there on our service manual and service standard, went back to GDS, most recently to do a head of profession for design role, and then moved over to what I'm calling proper Cabinet Office, because all of these roles have been within the Cabinet Office. Have moved into this role in January as head of design for our Test, Learn, and Grow program. I do a lot of communities work, a lot of things like this, a lot of meetups. They're super valuable. I love everything like this, getting us together to talk about our common challenges and come up with new approaches. I co-run an international design and government community. This is open to anyone who's a civil service in any country in the world can join, as long as you're happy to have design-minded kind of conversations and talk about user-centered design. So if you want to learn more about that, the website is international.gov-design.com. So Test, Learn, and Grow. What is this thing? We're calling it a new approach. It's very simply doing a thing and learning from it in very small increments, and just continuing this cycle, finding indicators to help you learn what are things that are working that can be scaled, what are things that aren't working that can be stopped quickly before spending too much money and time. But really trying to start small, focus on assumptions and things to test rather than having a big flashy solution that we think is going to work and spending 2 years on delivering it. So it's flipping that approach on its head. Some of our high-level aims are closing the gap between policy and delivery, accelerating innovation, and enabling continuous improvement across public services. I'll dive into a bit more detail on these because these are quite high-level ambitions. What I think is really exciting about this work is the leadership buy-in that we have. So this is an image of Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. He announced this Test, Learn, and Grow program of work in a really fantastic speech about reform in January, I think, this year, or no, December 2024 on the slide. But he said in that speech that this approach, it needs an appetite for risk. Some things won't work properly the first time, but if we are terrified of failure, we will never innovate and will carry on doing what we've always done. So we have very senior ministers bought into this approach of test and learn and advocating for quick failure, which is really amazing to have and kind of lends itself to the conversation that we were just having. All of this is not new. We're calling it a new approach, but if you've been in government a long time, if you've been in the public sector a long time, this really isn't new. We've tried this many times, and there's so many other parts of the system that are working on this as well now. But when I think about my experience the past 8 years in government, something that springs to mind as I've been kind of pulling slides together and building the narrative of this work, like, wait, what about this? What about this government transformation strategy, where we were also talking about bringing policy development and service design closer together? When I first joined GDS back in 2017, I was working on training to upskill digital colleagues in policy and policy colleagues in digital. So these conversations have been ongoing probably a lot longer than I've been around in government. I've also found this really great research that someone called Rob Kane did back in 2016 at GDS, looking at the whole cycle of how from kind of like deciding to do a thing to then delivering a thing, looking at who's involved, and kind of highlighting this, what we call the kind of wall that policy gets thrown over to delivery. All of this research that was done in 2016 informed work in GDS called the Services Program, which was run by Lou Down at the time. And it led us to do things like service communities. So we tried out a lot of things to kind of start to change the way that government works in terms of policy to delivery and joining up different professions in delivering work. So service communities was bringing together different professions, so policy delivery, operational delivery colleagues, into the same space. So people that were working on similar areas of work across wide service journeys. So for example, starting a business. So there's maybe 10 departments that are all involved in starting a business. People they shouldn't have to know what those departments are and what they do and what services they own. So it's about kind of creating these consistent, usable, efficient services. This was a piece of work that went on for a couple years and then ended. But if we look further back, there's examples like Total Place. So this was a labor government initiative in 2009. This was at the local level. So this was bringing together multi-agency collaboration to provide better public services at lower costs. So this was a really great, ambitious piece of work, trying to avoid overlap and duplication between organizations, get public sector at the local level to work together more efficiently to improve service delivery, as well as across Whitehall. So there's so many examples that we can pull from. There's so much we can learn from in the work that we are doing. This is a slide that I always like to include in talks that I do. This is kind of looks at the traditional way of government delivering a thing, which is usually starting from the side that says policy. So usually starts from a policy and then a service is developed. And what we need to do is kind of have this multi-lens approach and zoom in and out between the policy and the service being what people interact with and use. So by kind of doing these two things in tandem, the zoom in, the zoom out, the multidisciplinary teams, we can create better services. And I think what is making the Test, Learn, and Grow work different. Well, I think it's different. What we're kind of adding to it is this this kind of addition of local. So all of our work is place-based. We're working with local authorities. We're working with places and hoping to scale things up across regions and across the UK where applicable. So it's about, you know, going from this very Whitehall-centered, this is the policy, top-down way of working, to this very much bottom-up, going to the front line, working with local authorities, and bringing that learning into Whitehall and having this more whole system approach. So a bit more detail on what test and learn is. I kind of had that more simplified diagram at the beginning, but we're really understanding at the define stage, kind of understanding a problem, starting to develop quickly some solutions, some ideas, some things to test, testing those things in short kind of iterative cycles, doing some evaluation, and then kind of as we learn and as we get indicators around what's working, what's proving useful, we can start to diffuse and scale and hopefully start to shape the system. So we're continuously working in this, this learning loop. As I mentioned on that previous slide, it's really important that our work is in partnership. So we don't have Whitehall only teams. We are working with local government partners for all of the work that we are doing, and also bringing in policy, user-centered design, as well as the third sector into our work. We want to ensure that we're using the word grow rather than scale. We want it to be organic. We want to find the things that are working, looking at localization, understanding the nuance of why things may work in a place, and then how it can be scaled and supported. We are being iterative and not top-down, super important to the way that we're working. And we're working in the open. Again, from the speech that Pat McFadden did, it was a big call to work in the open, to share what's working as much as we're sharing about what isn't working, but also really showing the experience of citizens and frontline workers, and really being open to bringing in people and having that participatory way of working for some of the challenge areas that we're working in, so that we can really get the right knowledge in the room in order to develop better solutions. As I said, we've been doing this place-based work. We have some initial places that we've been working with, and I'll have a few examples later on in the presentation. But we've been working with Manchester, Sheffield, Liverpool, and Essex as our first partners. And again, this is supported by the Prime Minister, who in a speech last month talked about how people on the front line, they know what the problems are. They usually have some of the solutions, because if you have to deal with the frustration every day, you usually come up with an answer. So again, that's kind of supporting our theory of change, of kind of going to these local places and doing bottom-up policy design, and then scaling, growing, bringing learning back into Whitehall. Everything that we are working on is aligned to the government missions. So if you are unfamiliar with these, there's 6 missions. The call to action for these is for departments to align their work to these, but also for the wider kind of businesses, charities. They're really a call to action for people to get behind. So the way that we are trying to change the system is through what we're calling accelerators. So our accelerators are about accelerating mission delivery, so aligned to all of those missions that I just showed. They're about alleviating pressure on citizens and frontline staff, trying to give back time and bandwidth, but also to avoid escalating public spend and trying to work on prevention. So we'll have, probably at the same time, we might have 4 of these accelerators running at the same time. Each will be a distinct multidisciplinary team, including policy, digital and data, local partners, and policy subject matter experts. Each of the accelerators will be aligned to one of the missions. And then we have this other piece of work, which I'm calling like the infrastructure for all of this, which is foundations. So foundations is looking at really how can we maintain and sustain the work that we're doing within the accelerators? How can we create a whole systems change through building capability, through streamlining funding, to grow capability, and to increase that local regional capacity to support innovation. So it's a very kind of systems approach with lots of different ways that we're trying to address the problem. We have a lot of principles. We've been trying to ask for advice on how to cut them down, but I think they're all wonderful, and I don't want to get rid of any of them. I'm not going to read them out for the sake of time, but I'll keep them on the screen for a bit. These were shared on LinkedIn recently by Nick Kimber, and we've had really incredible feedback and response that we've been looking at, and yeah, hoping to iterate based on that feedback. That's a blank slide. So I think in this bit, I'm going to start to get into a bit more of like, what are we actually doing? So as I said, we're working in multidisciplinary teams. We have colleagues from the Ministry of Housing, Communities, and Local Government that are embedded into our team, bringing that policy expertise as well as that local government expertise. So in every kind of accelerator that I showed, we will have people who have direct kind of ins to the policy teams for the areas that we're working on, embedded on the team. We are just finishing up a hiring campaign to bring in digital and data practitioners to the team. We have people from the evaluation task force, which is a cabinet office team that are helping us a couple days a week. And then we have these local partners that we're working with. We have local leadership groups that are informing our work. And then we have charities as well that we're learning from that are working in similar spaces to us in terms of the policy areas. Quite key to our strategy around local place-based work is having paired places. So for every accelerator that we are working on, we will have 2 local authorities that we are working on that same policy challenge with. The idea is that we can share learning, ideas, and support between those local authorities, and try to start that kind of grow and scale and diffusion through having those paired places. As mentioned, working in the open is really important to us. We so far have only been able to talk in the open on LinkedIn. We're trying to get some other kind of forums and blogs and posts out about our work, but we really want our local partners to be writing about the work that we've done so far, and we really want to kind of find spaces where we can continue to have conversations with people who can inform our work. So far we've done 4 demonstrators in Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, and Essex. So one demonstrator per place. And we've been working on 2 policy areas. So family hubs being one policy area, temporary accommodation is the other. We've been working since January, and we're just wrapping up now these first demonstrator projects. So I've been working quite quickly just to kind of learn how is the model going to work? How do we do this? How do we work with local partners? Who do we need on the team? And helping figure out how we can then start our next phase of work. So we've been doing kind of systems mapping, user research, developing prototypes, testing and iterating those prototypes, and then doing some light evaluation on them. We've been going to these places. It's really important that we are traveling, getting out of London, going to our partners and really working with them in depth, getting a lot of FaceTime. This has meant most recently a lot of wood paneled rooms, which have been quite nice. This was in Essex at Essex County Council. So I yeah, wanted to share quite a bit high level in terms of what we've done on temporary accommodation and family hubs, to give you an idea of what we've achieved so far through these demonstrator projects. So on temporary accommodation, we were looking at reducing costs. And our aim was, how could we reduce expenditure without impacting the standards of temporary accommodation? How might we increase the supply of temporary accommodation, and how might we prevent people from entering temporary accommodation through evidence-based support? Temporary accommodation is kind of one of the services that is really having a massive impact on local authorities across the country. It's costing a lot of money. There's a really great need. So it was a really important to address and work on it. Sorry, my slides have gone wonky. So in Essex, we were working on developing some behavioral informed messaging around housing options. This was to support staff, but also to give people, to give staff agency as well as people approaching for temporary accommodation, kind of a bit more agency in their decision making around their options. So we worked with local authorities within Essex, Chelmsford, Basildon, Colchester, Harlow, and Southend-on-Sea. And we developed some clear, accessible comms around housing options to help people approaching for temporary accommodation make more informed choices. So a lot of people that are approaching councils, especially in Essex, for temporary accommodation, have this assumption that they will get social housing quite quickly, and often that is not the case. So people end up in hotels or B&Bs, and that is not a great experience for a person, and it also is very costly on a local authority. So the infographic is helping kind of guide a conversation around like managing expectations around what might it look like to kind of go on a social housing route and being on a list for social housing versus going into private rented sector. In Liverpool, we were working with them on their data, so really helping them understand where are they at, using data to give really better oversight over their service delivery to help them reduce costs. So working with them to clean up their data, bring it together, and then establish ways of using that data in a routine way to help them make more informed decisions and to help inform some interventions that they could do. On family hubs, we were looking at participation in reach for family hubs. So family hubs are aimed at parents with children that are under school age. So this was looking at increasing, outreach approaches to increase access to evidence-based services. This was in line with the government's plan for change goal around having 75% of children to a good level of development by 2028. So the aim for this was to kind of get parents to move from light touch family hub services into these more evidence-based services that could support their children's development. So the team looked at increasing uptake of something called Making It Real, and REAL stands for Raising Early Attainment and Literacy. So the team tested 2 different ways of increasing the uptake in these evidence-based services. So they looked at how could you just use demonstrations, so show people what might happen in these evidence-based services, give parents a flavor of what that might look like, what that could be. And then they also experimented with sending WhatsApp voice notes that were testimonials from parents that had participated, had their children participate in these programs to other interested families. And they learned a lot around kind of assumptions around what language they might send that in. So the council staff told us recently that they had this assumption that they would have to offer these testimonials in languages like Urdu, which a lot of their the population that they were targeting spoke, but when they actually spoke to those people and did research and asked them and observed, they told them that 50% of them told them that they wanted those messages in English. So the team in Sheffield were telling us about how they learned that you can do this kind of like informed work very quickly. You can learn very quickly by doing these quite small interventions and experiments, and really getting out and talking to parents and observing parents, and that really informing their work. I think I've discussed that. So then in Manchester, similarly with family hubs, but this was specifically looking at doing pop-up outreach in community settings. So again, finding different ways of getting parents involved in different evidence-based services that the council offers through family hubs. So this was looking at meeting parents in different places than the team previously were. So going to libraries, GPs, food banks to increase uptake in a service called Welcome, which is a language screening for children. So they did 2 different interventions, experiments. They looked at how they could include information and do demos again of these literacy programs, and then also how could they use parent champions. So again, how can you use people that are already in the system that are finding it valuable, and how can you use them to then do outreach and increase engagement with the program. So what's next for our team? We are building up our team. I mentioned we had the campaign out for digital and data people to join the team. So we are currently going through that recruitment process. We're working on comms around the work that I just showed you around those demonstrators. So we're working with our local partners to write blogs, to kind of really share what they've done, and also to continue to share across local authorities that learning, to extend that learning. And then we're defining more around our work and what the next phase of our work will be, which we're calling Wave 2. So I don't think I mentioned, because that was the hidden slide, but Wave 2 of our work is when we have a £100 million fund for 3 years of the Test, Learn and Grow program. So we'll be working on a number of policy areas, as I mentioned, across government missions in a number of places. And we'll be defining that next month, and we'll be announcing that. And then we'll continue to figure out how we do our foundations and our grow strategy. We have an event next week. So if you are working in the healthcare space, particularly in neighborhood health, we are doing an event in partnership with Leeds City Council. It's on Thursday next week. So if that's something that you're interested in or doing work in, please come along. The Eventbrite is open online. So if you Google neighborhood health, have an office, Leeds City Council, it will show up. That's me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Cara. I'm going to take a couple of quick questions online, and then we'll take one in the room before we wrap up. So a couple of connected questions online. So Anonymous was straight in there at the start saying, are there plans to look into applying Test, Learn and Deliver to the legislative decision-making process and review how legislative decisions are made? And very similarly, James Cattell asks, Test and Learn works great in delivery, but how can we embed it in the policy profession? Drafting and handling ain't that agile. So I suppose there's a broader question there about how do you work with conventionally waterfall processes, I suppose, that perhaps don't lend themselves to this approach.
Yeah. Great questions. I think we are very ambitious in what we want to do. I think if Nick Kimber was here, he would be telling you about all the things that he wants to fix across the kind of bureaucratic system. I think on the legislative question, I think our initial work is really aimed at service delivery and that frontline kind of service delivery at that local level, and improving that. There may be other kind of test, learn, and grow accelerators that form. Sorry. I don't know what those are yet. I think, yeah, what I can say is that our work is ever kind of forming and learning as we go. And I think most importantly, where we're finding engagement and opportunity. So if we get approached with, a really great opportunity space where people are willing to do work and willing to try something different, then we're interested in those conversations. The other question around policy, test, learn, and grow. Again, I think that's all what we're figuring out with this work. So the intention of the accelerator work that we're doing is kind of how do we do more bottom-up policy development? So how do we bring learning from the front line and get that learning quicker into policy, to our policy colleagues that own these policy spaces, that have this really direct impact on frontline services. So how can we bring those things closer together to have more user-centered policy development?
Thank you. And I saw a hand there just in the room. So
that is a tiny mic for a tiny person. Hi, Pratik, Policy Lab. I'm actually just interested in what you think the opportunities are for some of the more participatory, deliberative, co-design type methods that Catherine talked about in the program, because it strikes me that you have a sizable fund for the next 3 years. But if the way of working is to endure, perhaps one of the things is to embed a learning cycle all over that. What are the opportunities do you see for more participatory co-design type methods? Not only going to struck with the PM's kind of comments about if you're on the front line, you know the solutions. Co-designing with them and members of the public and perhaps experts in place. What do you see the opportunity for that kind of method in your program?
Yeah, really great question. I think I'm gonna have a similar kind of annoying response, which is we need to see how the work develops. So it's definitely like core to how we're going to be working is participatory. We don't know what that means or looks like yet because we haven't defined partners and policy areas or team members. We're currently very small. So I think all of that is to play for. All of that is to be determined and designed. But definitely as the head of design on the program, it's something that I'm definitely advocating for.
I'm really interested because, as Pratik said, you and I, and it's Catherine again, if the cameras haven't changed around, there's a lot of shared incentives here. And it struck me that in my talk, I didn't talk about how I would see success. And I'm interested in how you would see success, because you have made me think, oh, right, okay, actually, I would see success in terms of just rendering us obsolete in a couple of years' time, because we've done the systems reform and we've done the culture shift that means that everyone's behaving anyway in participatory ways.
Yeah, I think at that like policy to delivery level, the success is having policy that is more informed by citizens, by users, kind of closing that gap between policy and delivery, and really instilling this culture of test and learn. So kind of quick experimentation where we can see it will be useful. And just having people as well that like appetite for risk. I think as we were talking about during your talk, having this culture that is more open to just trying things and doing things rather than kind of talking and writing papers and kind of keeping things, kind of keeping things and trying to get things perfect before we actually go out and do something. And I think at a kind of systems level, it's in an organizational, across government level, it's making sure that government is is enabling people to work in that way. And there's so many aspects of that. So Pat McFadden talks a lot about recruitment. How can we make recruitment easier to bring in the right people to do this work? So there's so many parts of the system that also will hopefully change to then enable us to work in this way.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry to those of you in the room who had questions, you might get the chance to ask them afterwards over pizza. And to those of you online, we'll share any questions on Slido with our speakers as well. I'm conscious I'm the only thing between those of you in the room and pizza, and those of you online and logging off. So just a few quick parish notices before we depart. Some other events coming up that you might be interested in. Next week, I'm hosting Data Bites just down the road with Public Digital. We've got Laura Gilbert, MHCLG, talking about AI, Alex Blandford talking about politics and civic tech, and Ed Humphreys from the Office for Stats Regulation. Connected by Data on the 14th of May, if you're interested in participation, we've got an online community of practice that's all about public engagement around data and AI. GovCamp Scotland is coming up on the 19th of June, and Camp Digital is coming up on the 3rd of July. If you've got a notice you'd like to share at the next event, please do get in touch with us and we'll add it to the list. A reminder that that next event will be on Wednesday, the 28th of May, here at the MOJ at 6 p.m. You'll be able to join us in person or online. Do go to our website for further details, but I can tell you that Asia and Worthing Council will be speaking, hopefully at that event, about redesigning the organisation in a participatory and agile way. And shortly, maybe not that event, but the one after, we will have somebody talking about their new book on how you can use AI in your work. So nice variety of topics there. Again, if you would like to help us out as an organizer, speaker or sponsor, please give us money for pizza. It's transformgovtalks@gmail.com. And if you want to do one thing to help us out, tell someone how much you enjoyed tonight, some of the insights that you got from it, some of the actions that you'll be taking away, and do encourage them to sign up. And please do sign up yourself as well, transformgov.org.uk. All that remains for me to say, some very big thank yous, first of all, to all of you who came along tonight and joined us online. And please do join me in a huge thank you to our brilliant speakers this evening, to Catherine and to Cara. Thank you very much indeed.